My friends, fellow citizens, and seekers of true empowerment, today we stand at a crossroads. We were promised a system built on three great pillars: national stability, institutional integrity, and global cooperation. These were supposed to protect our prosperity, ensure our representation, and safeguard our security. But look around. What do we see? Instead of stability, we see stagnation. Instead of integrity, corruption. Instead of cooperation, subjugation. The very structures meant to empower us have become instruments of control. Power is hoarded by the few, while the many, people like you and me, are left alienated, disenfranchised, and voiceless. But this is not just frustration, it's not just a feeling, it's a system, a pattern, a cycle that repeats itself, a machine designed to keep us powerless. To understand it, we must look at the negations driving this decline, what I call the Negated Establishment Triad. These are three interconnected failures that keep power locked away from the people. First, let's talk about stability. It's a word that sounds reassuring, doesn't it? Stability means security. It means order. It means a foundation we can build upon. That's what we were promised. But the reality, stability has been turned against us. It has become an excuse for inaction, a mask for stagnation, a shield for those who benefit from keeping things exactly as they are. Our democracy is supposed to be a government by the people, for the people. But tell me, when was the last time you felt like your vote truly mattered? Gerrymandering, voter suppression, an election system built to insulate those in power. Our voices are fading into a whisper while the elite roar with unchecked influence. And what about our economy? We are working longer hours for wages that barely move. Automation, outsourcing, a rigged financial system. These are not accidents. They are the deliberate choices of a system that sees the worker not as a stakeholder, but as an obstacle to profit. Even the laws, the regulations, the rules that were meant to create fairness, who do they really serve? Not us, not the people. They have become so tangled, so convoluted that only the wealthy and well-connected know how to navigate them. Stability has become paralysis. And in that paralysis, power concentrates, while ordinary citizens are left watching from the sidelines. But where are the institutions that were supposed to protect us? Where are the checks and balances? The agencies, the courts, the lawmakers sworn to serve the public, captured, bought, turned against us. Regulatory agencies no longer regulate, they cater to the industries they were meant to oversee. Laws are not written for the common good. They are crafted in back rooms by lobbyists, rubber-stamped by politicians who serve donors, not voters. Justice itself, the courts, the very backbone of a fair society, has been twisted. It is no longer blind, no longer impartial. It bends for those who can afford to tilt the scales. The wealthier you are, the more justice you receive. And Congress, a graveyard of inaction, a body designed to solve problems, has become a monument to gridlock. Urgent issues go ignored, while those in power perfect the art of doing nothing, because doing nothing serves their interests just fine. And so trust erodes. People see the corruption and stop believing in the system. They disengage. And the more we disengage, the more these institutions slip further from accountability, further from the people, and deeper into the hands of an unaccountable elite. But perhaps national institutions are failing because power has moved elsewhere. Perhaps it isn't Washington we should be looking at, but the world beyond it. Globalization was supposed to bring opportunity. It was supposed to expand prosperity, open doors, lift all boats, and yet, who has actually benefited? Not the worker who lost their job when a factory was shipped overseas. Not the small business crushed under the weight of an international conglomerate. Not the voter whose national policies are now shaped not in their capital but in distant, unelected institutions. Because make no mistake, corporate power has eclipsed government power. Multinational giants operate above nations, above laws, above accountability. Their boardrooms hold more sway than our ballots. And the trade agreements, the deregulation, the free market fundamentalism we were sold, they were never designed to empower nations. They were designed to strip them of their ability to protect their own industries, their own workers, their own sovereignty. The final betrayal is this: our governments are no longer truly governing. Institutions like the IMF, the World Bank, the WTO, they exert real control over policy. They dictate the rules of the game, and they do so without accountability, without oversight, without any obligation to the people. At that point, what does sovereignty even mean? If our policies, our economies, our futures are dictated from beyond our borders, then democracy itself becomes a hollow performance. And so the cycle continues. When institutions fail, people lose power. When people lose power, sovereignty crumbles. And when sovereignty crumbles, institutions drift further from accountability. Each failure feeds the next, over and over again. This is the world we live in, and it's a world that populists like Steve Bannon have spent years railing against. They look at this cycle and say, tear it down, burn it to the ground, and I understand that impulse, I do. But negation alone is not a solution. Simply replacing one elite with another does not return power to the people. It just shuffles the faces in charge while keeping the system intact. Power must not merely change hands, it must be fundamentally restructured. So what is the answer? Many voices, loud voices, say the answer is destruction, that if the system is broken, we should tear it down, that if the elites have failed us, we should replace them with a new ruling class, that the way forward is through anger, through division, through the strong hand of a leader who will punish the corrupt and restore power by force. But let's be honest, how many times have we heard this before? History is filled with movements that promise to tear down the old order, only to replace it with a new hierarchy just as disconnected, just as self-serving, just as corrupt. The faces at the top change, but the people remain powerless. This is not a revolution. It's a reset of the same cycle. Empowerment does not come from simply rejecting the current system. It comes from replacing it with something better, something built on participation, accountability, and real representation. It starts with a new understanding of stability. One that isn't about preserving the status quo, but about ensuring real economic opportunity, real civic engagement, and real access to power. We need a system where every citizen has a stake in their future, not just in theory, but in practice. That means economic structures that serve the worker, not just the shareholder. That means political systems that cannot be bought. That means a government that is not a fortress of bureaucracy, but a tool of the people. It demands a rebuilding of institutions, not just by swapping out the faces in charge, but by ensuring they are unshakably accountable. That every lawmaker, every judge, every regulator serves the public, not private interests. That power flows upward from the people, not downward from a privileged few. And it requires a redefinition of sovereignty, one where our nation is not ruled by faceless corporations or supranational bodies, but by its own people. This is not a call for isolation, but for self-determination. Trade, diplomacy, and international cooperation can still exist, but they must serve the nation, not undermine it. If a government does not have control over its own economic and political destiny, then it is not a government at all. It is a puppet. That must end. This is not just about negation. It is about reaffirmation. It is about taking the forces that have been weaponized against us and turning them back into forces that work for us. This is what empowerment looks like. Not a new set of rulers, not a new version of the same broken system, but a fundamental shift, one that ensures power is not merely borrowed by the people but belongs to them. And that brings us to the choice ahead. This is the moment. The choices we make now, what we fight for, what we demand, what we refuse to accept, will determine whether we reclaim power or surrender to another iteration of the same machine. One path is easy. It plays to our frustration. It tells us to tear everything down, to lash out, to replace the old rulers with new ones and hope that things will change. That path has been walked before, and it has led time and time again right back here to disillusionment, to betrayal, to a new set of elites taking the place of the old. The other path is harder. It is not built on rage, but on reconstruction. It does not rely on a single leader, a single movement, a single promise of salvation. It relies on us. on people willing to fight not just against something but for something, people willing to build, not just destroy. And make no mistake, this will not be handed to us. No institution willingly surrenders its own power. No system reforms itself. History is not written by those who wait for a savior. It is written by those who seize the moment, take the risk, and demand something greater. So, what will we choose? Will we settle for yet another cycle of disempowerment, another transfer of power from one elite to another? Or will we break the pattern? Will we build the institutions, the systems, the structures that ensure power is not just concentrated in fewer hands, but distributed into the hands of all? The road ahead is difficult, but the choice is clear. If we rise to this challenge, if we act, if we fight, if we build, then we will not just reclaim what was lost. We will create something greater than has ever existed before, and that is a future worth fighting for.